Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to a new video. Today I want to take you through one of my bookshelves. One of two that I have. This one is sort of my nice display shelf. I like to display some of my favorites with some trinkets, some odds and ends. Sort of a eclectic, spooky, and then also romance vibe. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up, shall we? Don't mind the sound of my cracking knees. So here at the bottom, we have a little friend. This is actually a Christmas ornament I got at the dollar store a few years ago, but I leave it out all year round now because I like it. And who says cardinals are seasonal? Here's also a flower crown I made for a Renaissance fair I went to with my friends. We sat around the floor and made flower crowns for an afternoon. It has some butterflies that this one sort of got its wings clipped a little bit. It was quite a windy day and I think it got caught on some things. But it has these faux yellow flowers, little wood acorns, some pale leaves, green leaves. I think there was a second butterfly somewhere. Oh, here he is. I think he's hiding. There it is. So, made this with some twine, with some hot glue, and with faux flowers. So I just have this sitting here on top of an old camera case. I think in a separate video might go through this case and all that it contains. It's an old 35mm camera. But anyway, we're not here to talk about these. We're here to talk about books. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books, all by the same author. These are all books by L.J. Smith. She's a YA fantasy writer. I think mostly what you might call urban fantasy. Fantasy romance particularly. So we'll move our little cardinal friend out of the way for a moment. So here we have the first series I read by her, The Vampire Diaries, which you may be familiar with from the popular CW show. It's a show that I watched after I'd read these books. So these first two books are the original trilogy that LJ had written in, I believe, the early 90s. So it's The Vampire Diaries, The Awakening, which is the first book, and The Struggle. So later in the 2000s, they were repackaged as one omnibus. And then here we have The Fury and The Dark Reunion. So actually, I thought it was a trilogy. It's actually 4 books. Just going to sit down a bit more comfortably here. I was getting confused with The Secret Circle, which is 3, split, one of them being split into 2 across both these books. But anyway, we'll get to The Secret Circle. So the original 4 books here do not closely follow the show whatsoever. The basic premise that of the love triangle of the characters, for the most part, is there, but a little bit different. I'd say this original series is a bit more horror almost. I think the show is a bit more supernatural, a bit more magic-y, and this original series is a bit more spooky, scary. Now, as LJ then returned to the series and wrote these new books, this new trilogy known as The Return. So we have The Return Nightfall, The Return Volume 2 Shadow Souls, and Return Volume 3 Midnight. So these go in a way different direction. These go way more spiritual almost. There's different dimensions. There's way more magic. There's sudden plot twists that don't seem necessary or really planned. They seem like they're just conjured so that there can be something new to happen. I really enjoyed them when I was like a teenager, when I was like 13, 14, but hindsight, I don't know how good these three are, but you know, to each their own. I love them for what they are and for that time, and I keep them for that nostalgia. Maybe someday I'll reread them. Wouldn't that be nice? And then we have The Secret Circle. So similar, really all of her books written in the, I think, late 80s into the 90s, and then repackaged later. So Secret Circle is about witches, where Vampire Diaries is about vampires. Secret Circle is about witches. Again, a bit spookier. There's a ghost story aspect here. The magic is a bit scarier, I would say. Feels more threatening than I think anything they've ever shown on the Vampire Diaries show or even the Secret Circle show, although I think it was maybe a bit closer. I enjoy the Secret Circle. Not one of my favorites. When I was 12, 13, I reread these so many times. I reread books a lot when I was younger. Now, I never reread things. I get bored, but when I wasn't the one buying my books, when I was relying on my parents to fund that, I had what I had, so I would keep rereading them until eventually I'd be given a new book. Next, we have these two books. In my head, they're related because I got them so close together, and they were these two were re-released much more recently than these ones. So these ones had already been out for some time. By the time I discovered them, these two had more recent omnibus re-releases. So The Forbidden Game is probably still my favorite. It's a trilogy. So the original series was 3 books that they then compiled into one. So it's The Hunter, The Chase, and The Kill. And of course, this is the era of YA publishing where every book had like half a face on it. A classic. This one is about sort of a shadow demon who is obsessed with this young lady here. And it is, again, much more horror oriented. A lot of LJ's writing is very horror oriented. So it's very exciting. It's very, thrilling. And then Dark Visions, again, a trilogy. We have The Strange Power, The Possessed, and I Can't Read, The Passion. This is probably the one I've reread the least. I maybe read it two times, maybe 3. I remember it the least, but it was rather exciting. Girl at an institution that's doing sort of psychological experiments on these troubled teens, from what I recall. And there's maybe a plot or some corruption afoot. Things aren't what they seem. Much more of a thriller, much more of a kids with strange powers, science fiction-y almost kind of book. Maybe I should review that one. I remember enjoying it. And then we have the Night World series. So these are a series of interconnected stories. So each one is about a different set of characters, but they all exist in the same world. And each one is basically a different love story. So the premise of Night World is that there's all these different factions of vampires, of witches, of shapeshifters, and they exist in the night world, sort of an underground society. And there's some political intrigue with that, but it's very minor. But there are some really cute fantasy romance stories there. And this is one that I know holds a soft place in my heart because it was never finished. LJ published each of these stories, all leading towards sort of one big culminating finale. You know, they're anticipating the apocalypse, things are shifting, the powers from the night world are needed, and readers are left hanging because she never finished it. For a long time, I used to, not obsessively, but regularly, check LJ Smith's website or blog for updates. I don't think I've seen a real update from her in years, so I don't know that we're ever going to get that conclusion, but I hold out hope. I'll be waiting. If it ever happens, I'll read it. So this is my nostalgia shelf of some of the books that I really, really enjoyed when I first actually really started to get into reading. I didn't really read very much as a kid. I read here or there, but I never really finished a book. Like when you start reading chapter books as a kid, never really. I would start them, never finish them. So reading a 400, 300 page book as a 11, 12-year-old was a big deal. So that's the shelf. I'm going to try and scoot up carefully here to the next shelf. So this shelf is a touch more colorful than the rest. This is sort of my, I don't know what you'd call it. Certainly I have my favorite romance books here. I think some publishers would classify a lot of this as like women's fiction, which I don't know how I feel about that label. But also, few other labels come to mind beyond just fiction. Certainly, my Taylor Jenkins Reid section, I think, is just fiction. These, you can call these romance. But let's start from the left. So, here, these are not actually published novels. These are hand-bound fan fiction. My friend Abby made these for me for my birthday. So she learned how to bind books and made me 2 volumes of one of her favorite fics that she'd recommended to me, and it's a pairing I really like. So this is Chrissy and Eddie's Infinite Mixtape in 2 volumes. So it's a Stranger Things fanfic. And it's a lot of fun. It takes place in season 4, sort of a what if Chrissy didn't die premise. And it's very cute. It's very well written. It's, you know, if you're a fan of that ship, a fan of that fandom, I recommend it. And they're beautifully made. So it has this cloth spine, and then the paper here with the foiled design. And then I don't want to pull it out because I only have so many hands, but we'll try our best. I do want to show you the detail. So, end papers are beautiful. Oh, that's my stamp. Wonderful title page. All the information is there. I'm trying to find I think it's on the chapters, but sorry, could be wrong. I could have sworn there was like a bat image. Oh, I think it's up here. Yes. In the pagination, there's little bat icons. And I think that's neat. So I'll put that back carefully. I have them sort of propped in a display fashion here. Oop, knocking things over. So these are more little knickknacks I had for my Ren Fair outfit. They're little tinctures, little jars of whatnot. Little magic potions. It's just an empty old honey jar. I use them just for decor and in the off chance I need to hold something in a tiny jar. I have them handy. So next is my Taylor Jenkins Reid section. One of my favorite authors. I love this, not series, but related stories. Oops. That she's written. So we have the seven lives of Evelyn whomever. There's a book with a very similar title that came out the same year, I think. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Daisy Jones and the Six. Malibu Rising. And Carrie Soto is back. So, these are all about different women in different eras. And they're somewhat interconnected. And they're very, very fun. I think Carrie Soto is back might be my absolute favorite. But I do love them all and enjoy them all. So, next to that, we have my Emily Henry and Yulin Quang collection. I think very fitting because Yulin is adapting, I believe, People We Meet on Vacation and Beach Read. I believe one she's written the screenplay and the other she'll be directing. I could be misremembering that, but that is my memory. So, by Yulin, we have How to End a Love Story, which is an excellent book. I highly recommend. Beach Read by Emily Henry. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I'd say of her works, Book Lovers is definitely my favorite. It's the first one I read, and it remains my favorite. I don't have Happy Place, and I don't have Funny Story. I've read them, I just don't own them. I was at first holding out for paperback releases for Happy Place, but then I read it, and it wasn't up to the hype of these three in my mind, so I don't know if I need to own it, but I liked it. I just didn't like it as much as any of these three. So maybe someday. I liked Funny Story though. That one I would get in paperback. And on top of this, I have a little ceramic house that I painted with my friends. And this old camera. So throughout my shelves, sorry if that was loud, I have quite a few old cameras. These are all formerly my dad's. Fished them out of the basement, and he said, "You want them?" And I said, "Okay." So this is a Brownie Hawkeye camera, and I'm just gonna put it down for a second and show you the viewfinder is right here. So you can actually oh, I don't think it'll focus very well, but you can actually see through the viewfinder there. That's the top of my shelf. Here, there we go. Sorry, the focus is so terrible. So you can actually see since the viewfinder is just a series of mirrors, it reflects onto this little, or into this little lens here, and then I can film through it with my camera. So just a little camera, little shutter button. That's where you advance the film. And you can attach a flash, but we didn't have one. And then I don't actually know what that is or what it's for. Clearly another lens, but I don't know. Not sure. Anyway, that lives on my shelf next to this vase, which is a very pretty through the looking glass faux book, basically. I love the March hair there. I thought it was really pretty, so I purchased it. And now that leads us to the next shelf. I'm going to try and stand up without cracking all my joints. So here we have a Blue Mountain Pottery Swan. I bought this at an antique store, I think for like $15, because I collect some Blue Mountain pottery. I don't go overboard with it. I just buy what I think is nice and that I have use for. It's a very nice swan. It's got a lot of feather details, long swoopy neck. And I think it's meant to be a planter or something, but I use it to hold these tapered candles. This tarot card. Some business cards from different market vendors that I've visited. And then there's this postcard from a seller on Etsy that a friend of mine bought me a birthday present from. And behind it, we have this tall tower candle with the image of a raven and some crystals that a friend gave me as a special gift. And then a collage postcard from a friend. So it's a bit of a bird theme, a bit of a spooky theme. It's a little eclectic, it's a little colorful. And we have some rocks, little gemstones, a little sample from a local spooky apothecary kind of store. I'm just going to scoop these back where they belong. There we go. Don't want them to fall in. Some stickers from a local store, nice and spooky. I had these more on display at Halloween, but didn't have anywhere else to put them, so I put them on my shelf. This is, I think, a tea, but it wasn't clear to me, so I've left it as a decoration item. I have this marble bookend to hold my next section of books. Sorry if you hear some thumping. There's quite a bit of snow outside, and I think they're shoveling. So these are all my V.E. Schwab books. V. Schwab is probably my favorite writer. I think I have all of her books. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know why I would say that. I have most of her books. I believe there's a whole new series that's spun off of this that I don't have. And I'm not counting her YA books in that either. But of her adult fantasy books, plus these, I'm making a lot of caveats for saying that. I own many V. Schwab books. So we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think possibly her most famous book now. It was very popular, I think, especially over COVID. Excellent book. Then we have my favorite, Vicious, which I have I have 2 copies because this was the first copy I got as a Christmas present. And then when Vengeful came out, I bought this and saw a matching hardcover, and I said, I have to have it. So this one's for decoration, and this one is to go with my set. And then we have A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. And then speaking of light, I have an old-timey light meter. I think it's German made, and I don't know how it works. And I could open it, but it's very hard to put back. It's metal, so it's all gears, it's all bits of metal, and it opens into like a fan kind of shape that senses the light, but it's hard to put back together. So I'm gonna leave it like this. But it's of course of the camera collection. And then this as well is some sort of German something. It's also part of the camera collection, but I don't know what it is. Auto Knips. Auto Knips. I'm not sure, but it's cute and strange, and it sits right there. And speaking of cute and strange, we have this little guy, this creepy skeleton boy. So his name is Baron, and he is from the Baronies, and he is a character from the Dropout Dimension 20 show, Fantasy High. And if you haven't seen the show, that's okay. All you need to know is he is a scary little guy who is conjured up and haunts one of the main characters. And he's so creepy. And a friend made him for me for my birthday. So he lives here on my spooky shelf. And he sits in front of some spooky books. So these are the other remaining 2 books by V. Schwab that I have. We have The Near Witch, which is, I believe, her first novel. It's a YA novel, sort of a ghost story, sort of spooky. And it's good. I enjoyed it, but it definitely reads as a first novel, which isn't bad, but you definitely see her growth later on. But still a very fun, very good story. And then we have Gallant, another spooky story. And beside that, we have one more camera. This one, I believe, is another German camera. It also opens, but it's hard to put back because the hinges are a little stiff, so I'm not going to open it up right now, but it's very nice. And similarly, another one up here, this one's sort of pocket-sized. It opens up too, but we're going to leave it alone for now. But it sits right here as a paperweight. And then we have this empty gin bottle. It's an odd gin, but I love the bottle design. I'll try and pull it out a bit carefully. Oh, it's thumping away here. So, here it is. It has a, oh my goodness, I've lost it. A jackalope on the front. How could I forget? I love jackalopes. So it has a jackalope emblem. It has these sort of fluted edges. I'll try and set it down so I can show you more easily. Be very careful here. So it's an interesting sort of Irish and Chinese inspired gin. Interesting flavors. Wasn't my favorite gin, but it wasn't bad, and I liked the bottle, so that goes a long way for me. I'm just gonna scoot it back where it belongs as a bookend. I tend to use heavy glass bottles as bookends because they're convenient. So, our next shelf is probably my best shelf. This is my dark academia shelf. It features a lot of spooky little guys, and I enjoy it. So, this is probably my most sort of refined, curated shelf. Nothing goes here without purpose. So, let's explore. This is my latest addition to the shelf. It is a sort of velvet lined or covered deer bust. And it's one of my favorite colors. It actually matches my reading chair, which maybe I'll show you in the next bookshelf tour since it's closer to that shelf. So he sits here very proudly. He fits wonderfully. In front of him I have a little bunny rabbit sticker that I got from a market. I don't have anywhere in particular to put it, so it stays there. And then these two beautiful bunny sculptures. These are resin rabbits. This one is like a old English teacup, like a china teacup, and this one is a little jester, a little fool, a little mime, a clown. I love especially the details on these. All their little toes are accounted for. Same with him. And I think they're so cute and so well made, especially his rough collar, which I really appreciate that it's sturdy, it's solid, it doesn't flop, it's not gonna lose its shape. They're very good little guys. So those are again from a different vendor at the Renaissance fair I went to. They were selling those and I couldn't pass them up. So they live here. I love bunny rabbits, especially white rabbits, which you'll see is a bit of a theme in other parts of this shelf. So up top here we have this Minolta camera. It's another 35mm camera. This used to be my uncle's. It's like from the mid-80s. I can't quite see what there it is, XG1. Pretty nice camera, no complaints. Don't use it much because it's hard to find film these days. Back here we have a little print of Mothman holding two cats and sitting on the roof. It's a postcard from my friend. This is a Crystal Head vodka bottle. Probably not the best vodka. It's a brand owned by Dan Aykroyd, though, I believe. Really great bottle design, though. He really popped off with that. And it looks perfect for my dark academia shelf. Here we have a book of matches. Is it from my friend Abby's 25th birthday? She gave them out as little party favors. And I think they look very cute here, and they really match the aesthetic. Here we have a very tiny blackbird on a skull. I think too small to be a raven. It's probably a crow, depending on what this scale is. And here we have a stone planter of a broken sculpture. So I used to have a lovely ivy plant in here that I trimmed, that I separated, and it was thriving as 3 separate ivy plants. But the one I left in here died while I was on vacation. I think it got too much light. It was very sunny those days, so I unfortunately had to say goodbye. to my beloved ivy plant, but her 2 propagated children live on, so not all is lost. Here I have a stamp. Can't quite pull it out, but it's a book stamp, which I use to stamp my books to indicate they're from my library. And it features a dead bird, another theme of my interests. It sounds so morbid to say, but anytime I encounter what is very sad is a dead bird, I do take a photo. And I have a folder of photos of dead birds I find. It's only happened a handful of times, but I think it's really interesting imagery. And it happens so often. They fly into windows and then they die. It's sad, but I'm letting them live on in photographs. So, onto the books here. We have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So, for anyone who's read that book, you might see some imagery that aligns. I'll leave it at that. And then we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Another one I really enjoyed. So Secret History is sort of the dark academia text. And it took me a very long time to read it, I'll admit. I started it many, many years ago in high school, and then I stopped partway through, probably a little over halfway. Then I picked it back up, and it had been years, and I felt, to really get back into this, I should start from the beginning. And so I did, and it still took me a while to get through, but instead of years, it was more like a year. And I finished it in the airport on the way home from a vacation. And it was excellent. If We Were Villains, I read much more quickly, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then we have Bunny by Mona Awad. So again, some imagery here that maybe aligns with that. A much more experimental book, much less straightforward, much more odd, but I did really enjoy it. And then this section is probably the most I can stretch the definition of dark academia, but it's academia adjacent, and that's enough for me and my interests. So we have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and the 2 sequels, Shadow of Night and The Book of Life. So these books are not really dark academia. I use that very lightly. They are about a woman who is an academic, and she's researching, I believe, medieval history. She's looking at manuscripts. She's looking at old texts. She's looking at alchemy and the way it's portrayed in the medieval world, I think. But she's also a witch. And there are other beings, much like Night World. There's witches, there's vampires, there's demons, or daemons, I think they're described as. And she's navigating that world as a witch who's not very good at being a witch. And she meets a man who's also a vampire. And a old book falls into her hands that people want, that's powerful. And so she's thrust in this world that she doesn't want to be part of. And that's and that's the story we see throughout each book. Very fun. It was adapted into a television series a few years ago, starring Matthew Good as the vampire love interest. And the woman's name I cannot for the life of me remember, but I learned more recently she played the main character in Warm Bodies. So she's done a few fantasy adaptations. Very fun show. And another gin bottle is hiding in the back here. Well, my favorite gin, actually. It's the Hendrix Orbium. Excellent gin. I recommend. And then last on this shelf, actually, is this little bunny rabbit tea light holder. a tiny tea candle, unlit. I'm trying to remember what this scent is. Oh, it's like a warm vanilla baked good kind of scent. It's very nice. Oop. Put it back up there carefully. All right. And now we're on to the final shelf. So the shelf is about a few inches taller than me, so probably maybe 6 feet tall. So I'm gonna have to lean back and up a little bit to get a good view for you. But we'll start over here. We have another little bunny friend. Now, the only reason he's up here and not down here is because he's not a pure white bunny. And unfortunately, that means he doesn't belong. But he's a little woodland guy, so he can live with these folklore fairy tale books. He's much more woodsy than spooky. So, we have 3 different, not necessarily series. Some are related, some aren't. So, Spinning Silver and Uprooted are both by Naomi Novik. And they're similar, but they're not related. But they're both fairy tale style fantasy romances. Both excellent. I enjoyed both of them a lot, and Spinning Silver actually has 2 romances for the price of 1, so highly recommend. Then we get to a more recent duology here, 1 Dark Window and 2 Twisted Crowns. Both excellent, excellent books. Highly recommend. They're wonderful fantasy about a girl who is both girl and monster, and how she deals with that, and the many powers around her that are trying to manipulate things. So, very good series. And then we have For the Wolf and For the Throne by Hannah Whitten. Not my favorites, I'll be honest, but I really enjoyed them for what they were. I think I really like the sequel. I think things wrapped up in an odd way. It didn't fully satisfy me in terms of, things concluded and I was happy, but I wanted a little bit more, But it managed to make me really like the character I didn't like in the first one. So I'd call that a success. And then we have Deathless by Catherine M. Valenti. So this one is a Slavic folklore, I think. Sort of a Russian folklore about Koshi the Deathless. And it's definitely written in a very fairy tale style. It's sort of repetitive, in a way, if that makes sense. So, things happen and keep happening until there's a change in that pattern. That sort of thing. And again, some gin bottles to act as bookends, just to keep things aligned. So we have the Hendrix Neptunia, which I don't remember the flavor very well. It didn't stand out to me though. And then we have Hendrix Lunar, which vaguely recall being good. But beside it, I thought fittingly was this really pretty milk glass jug that I got at a vintage market. It reminded me sort of like a bust of Diana, who's the Roman goddess of the moon, and I thought it was fitting there. Here we have this little chest. Hopefully that's not too loud. And in this chest are a bunch of my Disney pins. And I think I'll do a little tour of those soon. Not all of them are there, just the ones that don't fit where I keep them. And then we have an S for one of my initials, and an A for the other initial. And then up here in the back is a big old print of a tarot card that a friend gave me for my birthday. I believe it's of the world. So it's a dagger, and it's surrounded by teeth. And there's a bat, and some sprigs of flowers, and it's nice gold and black, and I think it looks very nice up top here. I would have loved it with this shelf, but it doesn't fit, and I didn't want to move this display up here. But I think it works really well up top here. It kind of adds height, adds visual interest to the height, and fills that space. So there you have my bookshelf tour. Hopefully I didn't go too fast, and hopefully it was at least somewhat entertaining. And I think next time we'll go through my other shelf where I have even more books. Until then, have a good night.